Unmistakably, ReZero is my favorite anime. From an outside perspective, it appears as a common medieval fantasy anime that it focuses exclusively on the women of the series. I mainly attribute this to ReZero's interesting and unfortunate marketing team that poorly reflects the true nature of the show. Though, if you've watched some of my videos digging deeper into the series, you could see the expansive quality and love put into the writing of the show. However, I have yet to tackle something of specific importance: the technology of ReZero. I admit that I'm far than well versed in the anime YouTube community. However, I believe that this is a topic that has largely been unexamined. Let me just say this. Despite how it appears to the untrained eye, and despite what Subaru may have ignorantly stated in the first episode, ReZero's world, unnamed as of yet in the anime, is far from medieval, based on our own world's tech scaling. Just a disclaimer, we are examining Lagunica's scaling specifically, as we are only shown Lagunica within the anime. Before we enter the bulk of this video essay, I find it important to mention that we must not simply look at the inventions from our point of view. Technology is born out of necessity. In many cases, magic may very well fit the niches of technologies that would be expected of the era. To reiterate, ReZero's technological path is very much different than ours. Despite this, there is a wealth of similarities between the world of ReZero and Earth. To begin, we need to narrow down the technological peaks of ReZero's world. For instance, Roswell's bathroom seems far too advanced for one to argue that ReZero is a medieval society. There are faucets, ceramic toilets, and toiletries reminiscent of the 19th century. It's not simply the existence of plumbing, but the style in which they're portrayed that points us towards this direction, allowing us to mark our first landmark in the tech tree. However, we must acknowledge that Roswell is very much an upper-class person in society that would definitely have access to such luxury. However, we must understand that the progress of inventions almost always starts at the top and trickles down to public access as society advances. Despite this quality helps us narrow down ReZero's place on the tech tree, as an advanced invention will always move the scale forward in years, while a primitive invention, such as the use of a well, will not bring back the technological scale, as this difference is based on wealth rather than the raw technological power of the country/world. Proper implementation of the toilet within most households was seen surprisingly much later in the 20th century than one would expect in economically Western countries, such as the United Kingdom, as many lacked proper plumbing. It is equally untrue to set back the perceived clock of a show's era based on more primitive technologies observed, to equate the United Kingdom of the 1950s to that of the 1700s. In addition to the scene of the bathroom, the existence of widely used window glass would be entirely anachronistic in a medieval setting. We have flawed tools of analysis from an outsider's perspective, but I still believe it's important to find a meaningful comparison to both our world to understand the culture, daily life, and author Tape Nagatsuki's intent. Moving along further, we're shown quite a bit of the cultural wear in ReZero's world. Suits, ties, peacoats, all things reminiscent of the 1800s, and possibly late 1700s, allowing us to further narrow down the search. I concede the fact that many characters are shown to be wearing plate armor. However, with the existence of magic, despite most characters not having the ability to use it themselves or without tools, most early forms of the gun would be rendered inadequate and purposeless, especially in the case of magical armaments such as cannons, which leads to the continued use of swords and armor. Possible guns in the ReZero world would most likely use firestones as a source of stored energy to propel a bullet, because it's already a well-used resource from the world, as noted by Crucian and Subaru's deal to share mining rights. Electricity and gunpowder as a factor of energy would be as familiar to us as to them magic. It only makes sense. Furthermore, most of the main cast refrains from using heavy amounts of armor regardless. Also, there's been partial uses of cuirasses and plate armor in our own history leading all the way up into the 1700s, so it isn't much of a stretch. Moreover, on the note of clothing, yes, it is entirely possible for a medieval or even classical age society to develop such clothes as these. But, for this situation, it is more an analysis of the development of culture that helps us place it within human history, rather than solely the technological development. It feels as though the world is in the very early stages of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, this part of the Industrial Revolution saw much less the harvesting of electricity for power, rather the usage of steam and river power to drive mechanical machines. Coal as a stored chemical energy is very similar to the firestones as stored thermal energy. To continue on this line of reasoning, I'd like to focus on the lighting ornaments shown across the show. For example, the street lamps are clearly modeled after those found in the Victorian era, and the chandeliers within Roswell's mansion are very similar to designs of kerosene chandeliers of the 19th century. It must be noted that these are powered by magic stones rather than oil. However, this is a way that light sources in the ReZero world would have developed naturally. It would make much more sense to employ a readily available resource rather than refining crude oil, which most likely does not exist in ReZero's world. ReZero's world obviously does not share the same events as history is found in our world. However, given both the technology shown in the show and the cultural implications of the style of such inventions, I will compare ReZero's world, more specifically Lagunica's development, to that of the early industrial period from about 1760 to 1840.